I felt it before I fully woke up. A chill crept into the quiet of our bedroom, not from the weather, but from the absence beside me. The other side of the bed was cold and empty, like it hadn't been slept in at all. It was 2 a.m. when I stirred, halfway between dream and dread, and that's when I heard his voice, low and clipped, echoing faintly from the hallway. He was whispering, urgently, like the walls themselves weren't safe. My heart began pounding, that kind of instinctive panic you can't explain but feel. Something wasn't right. Maya Ellison, a 34-year-old civil attorney in Portwell, Oregon, and for 6 years, I truly believed I married the right man. Brandon Hayes, charming, intelligent, and a rising star in the world of tech startups. He had this way of speaking like melted gold, always knowing what to say to make me believe everything was fine, even when it wasn't. Looking back now, I realize I'd been applauding a performance. That night the curtain finally began to fall. I sat up slowly, didn't turn on the light, didn't make a sound. Brandon's voice floated down the hallway, just barely above a whisper. I held my breath, straining to hear every syllable. Just a little longer. She still doesn't know anything. My blood turned to ice. She? Who was he talking to at 2 a.m, and who was he trying to reassure? I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened as though each word was another punch I didn't see coming. I heard his footsteps approaching and snapped back into motion, diving beneath the covers like a burglar fleeing the scene. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and closed my eyes, forcing myself to appear fast asleep. He returned to bed, his familiar cologne lingering in the air. But tonight, it didn't comfort me. It smelled foreign, artificial. "You asleep?" he whispered. I didn't respond. A moment later, he placed a hand on my shoulder, casual and tender, like everything was normal. But inside, my mind was spinning. The man I once trusted with my life was lying right beside me. And I didn't know what game he was playing, only that I wasn't going to be a silent pawn in it. The next morning, Brandon acted like nothing had happened. He brewed coffee, kissed my cheek, made his usual small talk as he strolled through the kitchen, phone in hand. But this time, I didn't look away. I didn't miss the subtle glances, the slightly forced smile. When he left for work, I sat down at the kitchen table, still gripping my coffee cup like a lifeline. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint account, something I rarely did. Brandon had always taken care of our finances. I trusted him with them. Or I had. Until now. I scrolled through the transaction history, my eyes growing colder with every line. $480 internal transfer, $950 withdrawn from an ATM in Santa Fe, New Mexico, $2,100 labeled consulting with no further detail, $700 to a company called Verinex Holdings, something I'd never heard of. My lips parted in disbelief. The amounts weren't suspicious on their own, but taken together they painted a pattern. A slow, calculated siphoning of our finances, like someone trying to bleed a joint account dry without tripping any alarms. I took screenshots of everything, every transfer, every date, every suspicious name. I saved the files in a new folder and backed it up to a hidden drive. The chill running down my spine told me I wasn't paranoid anymore. I was right. That evening, fate handed me the next clue. Brandon, like always, left his phone screen down on the table before stepping into the shower. Normally, I wouldn't touch it. I didn't want to be that wife, the one who snoops. But I wasn't blind anymore. The screen lit up with a preview message. Just make sure she still doesn't know. Everything's almost done. Celeste Varro. I went cold. Celeste Varro. I didn't know the name, but I felt it like a bruise forming. A woman. A co-conspirator. And almost done? Done with what? It was no longer a theory Brandon was hiding something monumental. Something that involved lying to my face, draining our money, and coordinating with someone else in secret. I set his phone back, precisely the way I found it, and returned to the kitchen like nothing had happened. But something had shifted inside me. A switch had flipped. The part of me that once trusted him without question had vanished. If Brandon was plotting something behind my back, he was about to find out just how well I could play the game. The next morning, he handed me a fresh cup of coffee, all smiles, like we were still living a fairy tale. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the man I used to see as my world. Now, all I saw was a stranger in a well-worn disguise. He sat down across from me, looking too comfortable, too rehearsed. "I think we should talk," he said casually. My heart skipped, but I kept my face still. "About what?" I asked, voice flat. He reached across the table, placing his hand over mine like we were in some heartfelt movie scene. "About finances. I think we should consolidate everything for peace of mind, in case something ever happens to one of us." He smiled. But his eyes? They were calculating. I nodded, pretending to consider it. "Sure," I said. And just like that, he smiled again, thinking he still had the upper hand. But he didn't know he'd already lost it. Brandon gave me a fleeting smile, thin, like smoke that vanishes before you realize it was ever there. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table and slid a mug toward me with practiced care, the kind of gesture that would have warmed me once. But now it felt manufactured. Hollow. "I think we should have a serious talk," he said. I looked up slowly, my face an icy mask. Any time Brandon started a sentence like that, it never led to anything good. "About what?" I asked, voice flat and unmoving, like a lake frozen in winter. He exhaled, as if he had rehearsed the moment in his head, and now it was finally time for the performance. He placed his hand gently on the table between us, reaching out for a connection that no longer existed. "I've been thinking, maybe we should reorganize our finances a bit. Just in case something unexpected happens, an accident, illness, whatever. It's just the responsible thing to do." I nearly laughed. The man secretly siphoning our money and scheming with another woman was now suddenly the poster child for financial responsibility. "What exactly do you mean by reorganize?" I asked, careful to keep my tone light. "Just combine everything," he said with a dismissive smile. "Our accounts, investment records, passwords, put it all in one place so if something happens, we're both prepared." His voice was as sweet as syrup, but his eyes betrayed him. Beneath the surface, there was calculation sharp and deliberate. I took a slow sip of coffee, bitterness biting my tongue. The concern in his tone was a lie, a clever distraction. I nodded, pretending to consider it. "Sure," I said. "He'll pull it all together." He smiled wider, satisfied. I smiled too, but mine was tighter. Two actors, exchanging lines in a play, neither believed anymore. Our brightly lit kitchen had become a stage for something darker. That evening, he was almost too pleasant. He poured wine, played soft jazz, even cooked dinner pasta with lemon zest and rosemary, like he used to during our early years. He rested his hand on my waist when I wasn't looking, and I stiffened under his touch. How many times had I felt that stiffness before and dismissed it? How often had I applauded his performance without realizing it was a performance? After dinner, he disappeared into his office. When he returned, he carried a light brown envelope in one hand, his face composed like a man about to deliver good news. "I have something I'd like you to sign," he said casually. just so we won't have to worry too much in the future. I narrowed my eyes slightly. What kind of paperwork? Just some minor adjustments. Consolidating our financial records. Legal convenience, really, he said, handing me the envelope. I accepted the stack of documents, but I didn't skim through them like a trusting wife. I read every line. One by one, the words started twisting in my stomach like a knife turning slowly. Asset transfer. Property ownership reassignment. Savings account migration. Retirement and investment holdings all rerouted to Brandon Hayes. I looked up at him. He was still smiling, still staring at me with that unsettling stillness, like he'd already won. "You planning to sign it now?" he asked. I placed the file on the table without a word. I moved carefully, each gesture slow and deliberate like someone holding back an earthquake inside. "This isn't a minor adjustment," I said evenly. "It's all my assets." "It's just a formality?" he insisted, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You and I are one, right? Why keep things separate anymore?" But I noticed the tightness in his jaw, the way a vein pulsed at his temple. He wasn't calm. He was cornered. "Then why the rush?" I asked. "And why didn't you bring this up earlier?" His expression faltered. The smile vanished like someone had flipped a switch. His voice dropped, colder than the wind that cut through our coastal home. "You're blowing this way out of proportion, Maya. Or maybe you're trying to take everything and leave me with nothing." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed now. His tone changed, no longer sweet, just sharp. "Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. It wasn't a warning. It was a confession." I gave him the smallest, most bitter smile I could muster, not out of affection, but defiance. "Let me think about it," I said, sliding the file toward the kitchen counter. "There's no rush, right?" He stared at me, searching for something in my face. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. "Right. Just don't take too long." I walked upstairs without looking back. My heart pounded like a war drum in my chest. I wasn't the same Maya I'd been a week ago. The moment I saw the name Celeste Vero light up on his phone, something inside me had shifted. The spell had broken. He thought he was clever, thought he could manipulate me without consequence, but he had never really known who I was beneath the polished exterior. That night, I sat alone in my home office. The only light in the room came from my laptop screen, casting long shadows over the pages of the very document Brandon had given me, still sitting untouched on the counter. He believed I was still considering it. But the moment I read the phrase transfer of ownership, it was over. He didn't need to hand me more lies. He had already handed me all the proof I'd ever need. Brandon didn't just want to leave me, he wanted to gut me clean, strip me of everything I had built before he even came into my life. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not then. Not ever. The very next morning, I arrived at my office just after sunrise. My hair was tied into a tight, deliberate knot. My face was calm, unreadable. Inside, though, a storm churned. But outwardly, I was every bit the professional I'd always been. Composed, sharp, and unshakable. I picked up my phone and dialed the one person I knew could help me without hesitation, someone just as discreet as she was brilliant. Erin Wallace, a financial attorney and my closest friend from law school. Years ago, I'd quietly helped her win a massive lawsuit in the tech sector. Since then, we'd kept our bond quiet but strong. No one knew how deep our loyalty ran, and now I needed it more than ever. She answered on the first ring. "Maya," she said, her voice crisp and alert. "It's been a while. I need to move all my personal assets," I said, "into a trust. as fast as possible. There was a pause, brief but not empty. "Brandon?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "And I need him not to know. Not until it's too late." Erin didn't ask another question. She didn't need to. She knew the kind of man Brandon had become, and she knew what it took to outrun people like him. For the next 3 days, I worked in silence, the kind of silence that cloaks war. I gathered every account number, stock certificate, deed, and statement with clinical precision. Anything and everything tied to my name. I created a brand new email address, used only to communicate with Erin. I hired a third-party trustee through a boutique law firm Erin had recommended, one based in Lakeside, Colorado, known for managing sensitive, high-value asset protection cases. Piece by piece, every cent I had was moved out of Brandon's reach. At the same time, I rebuilt my digital life from scratch. I changed every password, set up 2-factor authentication, opened an entirely new bank account, rerouted my savings, locked him out cleanly, quietly, and legally. With every secured file, with every transaction rerouted, something inside me shifted. I was no longer the woman waiting for betrayal. I was the woman ready to fight back. At night, I kept up the act. I still cooked dinner, still smiled, still let Brandon wrap his arm around me while the evening news played in the background. He still mentioned upcoming trips. He still asked if I needed help reviewing his paperwork. "I'm still going through it," I'd say with a soft smile. He had no idea it already flipped the board. A week later, everything was finalized. My full portfolio, including a $580,000 investment ID made with my firm, the condo I owned before we married, and my retirement accounts, was now secured in a legal trust titled to me and only me. Completely untouchable, completely invisible to him. That evening, Brandon appeared again with that same light brown folder, placing it on the dining table with exaggerated care, like he was offering me roses instead of a financial ambush. "You've had time to review it, right?" he asked, his tone soft and velvety. I raised my glass of wine, took a slow sip, and gave him a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "I have. I just need a little more time." He shrugged, unconcerned, because he believed he'd already won. "No problem," he said. "I just want everything neat, in case life throws something unexpected at us." I nodded and pressed my lips into a thin line. "I think so too," I said calmly. He didn't know that the unexpected was already on its way. I excused myself early that night and left him downstairs, half lost in a video call I was sure included Celeste Vero. I no longer needed to hear what they were saying. I didn't need more lies or half-truths. The fire was gone. What remained in me now was colder than anger, sharper than heartbreak. Before bed, I opened the last email I'd sent to Erin. The subject line was simple: "It's done." She responded in under a minute. "Trust locked. All assets secured. He won't see a dime." I turned off my phone. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply, not because the storm had passed, but because I knew I had survived its worst wave. Exactly 7 days after I hit send on that email, 3 sharp knocks echoed against my condo door. No one had called. No warning. Just the heavy silence of expectation. I walked slowly to the door, every muscle tensing. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a navy blue suit, holding a thick envelope. "Miss Maya Ellison?" he asked. I nodded. "You've been served. These are documents from the Harbor County Court." I took the envelope, my fingers squeezing it so tightly my knuckles went pale. When I closed the door, the silence of the apartment returned, but it didn't feel like safety. It felt like a calm before a new war. I stood still for a moment before walking over to the kitchen table. I set the envelope down and slowly began to open it. Brandon had made his move, and I was ready. The first line on the court document was clear and gutting. Petition for dissolution of marriage plaintiff. Brandon Hayes. Defendant. Maya Ellison. I flipped through the pages, my heart beat loud and uneven. But it wasn't until I reached the section marked Asset Requests that the true weight of his betrayal hit me all over again. Equal division of all marital assets, full ownership of the Maple Grove property, exclusive use of the Everlane electric SUV, 50% of the joint investment portfolio, monthly financial support due to income imbalance. I laughed a hollow, bitter sound that echoed through the silence of my condo. He really thought he could walk away with everything. That after stabbing me in the back, he could rewrite his future using the life I built. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone and dialed Aaron. "He filed," I said. "I know," Aaron replied calmly. "The court notified us this morning. Preliminary hearing is already scheduled." "Has asking for everything," I muttered. "Even the condo? Even the car?" Aaron chuckled, this time with a slight edge of satisfaction. Let him ask. He has no idea we're already a dozen steps ahead. 3 days later, I sat in Aaron's office, the autumn sun slicing across a thick stack of legal documents like golden blades. Aaron flipped through the pages like she was narrating an epic, each word of reassurance falling into place like clockwork. "Your assets were legally transferred to Stonebrook Trust before Brandon filed," she said. "They're secure, untouchable." My eyes landed on a bold line printed across one of the final pages. Assets classified as individually held, not marital. "Can he still sue for them?" I asked quietly. "He can try," Aaron said with a faint smile. "But he'll lose." I didn't exhale out of relief. I exhaled because, for the first time since this war began, I knew I had already won the opening move. The preliminary hearing was held in courtroom 7C of the Harbor County Civil Courthouse. Brandon showed up dressed like he was walking into a tech conference keynote. Sharp gray suit, crisp tie, hair perfectly in place. He didn't even glance at me as I walked in. He looked straight ahead, the very picture of calm. But his right hand was trembling as his attorney handed him the file. I sat beside Aaron, who looked every bit the seasoned warrior, back straight, voice ready. When the judge asked about the division of assets, Brandon's lawyer launched into his speech. It was textbook full of language about shared contributions, marital equity, and emotional support. I said nothing. Let him talk. When he was done, Aaron stood. Her voice cut through the room like glass. "Your Honor, all assets currently held by the defendant were legally transferred into a private trust before the filing of this petition. We have verified documentation, including dated transfer receipts and confirmation from Mountain Crest Bank, all prior to the 17th of last month. The plaintiff has no legal claim." The air in the courtroom seemed to thicken. Brandon leaned in to whisper to his attorney. They both bent over the file, lips moving quickly, hands flipping through pages. Finally, the attorney stood and requested a pause to verify the information. I still said nothing, but I stared directly at Brandon. And this time, he looked back, but the icy certainty was gone. There was panic in his eyes now. That night, I returned to my apartment, poured myself a glass of wine, and stood by the window. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall, each drop tapping gently against the glass like a ticking clock. For the first time in a long time, the apartment was still. No Brandon, no footsteps, no lies. I called Aaron and said only one thing. "He knows he's lost." She chuckled softly. "Hell try something else. They always do. And she was right. Because men like Brandon Hayes don't accept defeat, they recycle it, turn it into something more venomous, more underhanded. Sure enough, less than 72 hours after the preliminary hearing, the next strike landed. It wasn't a subpoena. It wasn't a legal email. It came in looks, sideways glances in the break room, hushed whispers in the hallway, conversations that ended abruptly when I walked into a room. At first, I thought it was paranoia. But when I saw my assistant, Rachel, standing frozen by her desk, phone in hand, eyes wide, I knew something had surfaced. "Rachel?" I asked. She looked up startled. "Too wasn't sure if I should tell you. Tell me what, Rachel?" Swallowing hard, she held up her phone and turned the screen toward me. A screenshot of a group message. "Maya Ellison is laundering money through a fake trust. Avoid her. Tax fraud investigation pending. Source: her husband's legal rep." I stared at it. My jaw locked. My vision narrowed. Brandon. He was spreading lies, poisoning the ground beneath me. "He's telling people I embezzled," I said. Rachel nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "People are saying he's been opening up to mutual friends, telling them you're hiding money offshore, that the trust is fake. He was trying to destroy my reputation not in court, but in the court of whispers and side eyes. The kind of war that drains you slowly." I turned, walked straight to my office, and locked the door. My silence would end here. That afternoon, I spent hours compiling screenshots, social media messages, anonymous leaks, every rumor traced back to him. And then I sent them all to Erin. 30 minutes later, she called. "We're issuing a cease and desist immediately," she said. "This isn't strategy anymore. It's slander. And we're about to bring the hammer down." "Good," I replied. "I'm not staying silent anymore." Because Brandon thought he could smear my name and come out clean. But he forgot one thing. I don't burn. I build fires. And I had just lit the match. I knew something was wrong the second I stepped into the office. The glances were too quick, the silences too sharp. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when I walked by. People avoided eye contact. It wasn't paranoia. It was a shift in atmosphere, and I could feel it crawling across my skin. I found Rachel, my assistant, standing at her desk, frozen mid-scroll, her phone trembling in her hand. She looked like she'd just seen something she couldn't unsee. "Rachel," I said, my voice low and sharp. "What's going on?" She flinched slightly, eyes wide. I didn't know if I should tell you." I crossed my arms, my tone like ice. "Tell me." She swallowed, then slowly turned her phone toward me. On the screen was a screenshot of a message spreading like wildfire. "Maya Ellison is laundering money under a fake name through a hidden trust. Nearly $100K in unreported assets. Don't say I told you source is her ex's former legal rep." The blood in my body seemed to freeze and boil at once. My jaw clenched, my fists curled. "Who's spreading this?" Rachel shook her head. "I don't know for sure, but people are whispering. They're saying Brandon's been talking to mutual acquaintances, framing it like you embezzled marital funds and used a shell trust to hide the money." I stared at her for a moment, then nodded. No words. Just fury, silent and loaded like a drawn bowstring. I turned and walked away, straight to my office, where I locked the door behind me. I wasn't going to sit in silence while a snake twisted the truth around my name. That afternoon, I dedicated 3 straight hours to building a wall of evidence. I printed every screenshot, every post from anonymous message boards, every leaked email. I highlighted source trails and timestamps, traced usernames and IP footprints. Each accusation, each slanderous whisper was a blade, but I turned them into a weapon of my own. Then I sent it all to Erin Wallace. Less than half an hour later, she called. Her voice was no longer cool or calm. It was sharp, blunt, a sword unsheathed. "We're threatening a defamation lawsuit immediately." "Good," I said. "I want him to know I'm not afraid. I am drafting cease and desist letters to both him and his lawyer. If he opens his mouth again, we drag him into court." "Do it," I said. "Let him know I won't be quiet anymore." But even as I hung up, I knew something else. Brandon didn't respect boundaries. He didn't believe in limits. He wouldn't stop unless he was forced to stop, exposed in broad daylight and stripped of every ounce of credibility. 2 days later, I saw him. I walked into Granger and Pine, the downtown bistro where the legal elite of Portwell often gathered for deals, dinners, and behind closed doors whispers. And there he was, Brandon, seated at the bar, laughing with 2 senior partners from a major Harbor County law firm. They looked like they were celebrating a win, toasting to something. I didn't hesitate. I didn't cause a scene. I walked straight to their table, leaned in between the men, and whispered just loud enough for Brandon to hear, "Watch your mouth, Brandon. It's digging your grave." He froze for half a heartbeat. Then, just as quickly, his mask snapped back on. Cool, polished, fake. "Maya, you're overreacting." I smiled cold as January wind. "I've sent a formal warning. All evidence is archived. One more whisper, and you'll be answering to a judge. I won't warn you again." I didn't give him time to respond. I turned and walked away like I was brushing off a stain on a silk blouse. The next morning, Erin called with an update. "He's gone quiet," she said. "At least for now." But we both knew that wasn't the end. Brandon wasn't the type to retreat. He was the type to regroup, to reload, to strike from the shadows. Later that day, I caught my reflection in the office bathroom mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Her jaw was clenched. Her eyes were made of steel. Gone was the version of me who once held out hope, who still believed maybe there was something in him worth saving. I stared at myself and whispered, "The game just changed. And this time, I'm the one writing the rules." The next morning, I was pouring coffee when my phone rang. The screen lit up with Erin's name, and it wasn't even 8 a.m. She never called this early unless it was serious. I answered immediately. "We've got a problem," she said. "No hello, no preamble. Just those 5 words that hit like a hammer." The mug in my hand paused mid-pour, coffee spilling over the edge onto the counter like a slow, ticking clock. "What happened?" "Brandon and Celeste just filed a new motion with the court. They're accusing you of financial fraud." The room spun. They've submitted signed statements, forged transfer records, internal logs claiming you hid money in offshore accounts and laundered nearly $100,000. I couldn't speak for a moment. My breath locked in my throat. My fingers tightened around the ceramic mug until my knuckles turned white. They forged it. "We're not 100% certain yet," Erin said, voice steady but grim. "But I've already sent everything to Naomi Reed. She's combing through the motion line by line. Naomi, our forensic analyst, the sharpest mind I knew when it came to financial fraud." "I'll keep you updated," Erin said. "We're going to get ahead of this." "I'm fine," I said quietly. But I wasn't fine, because if we couldn't prove the forgery, I wouldn't just lose my case, I could lose everything. If we couldn't find the flaw in those forged documents, it wouldn't just be my career on the line. It would be my freedom. That afternoon, I walked into Erin Wallace's office. The entire space had been transformed into a war room spreadsheet stacked like sandbags, folders stamped urgent, and a large whiteboard scrawled with names, numbers, and timelines. Sitting at a side desk was Naomi Reed, our legal analyst and forensic financial expert. Steel-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, fingers flying across the keyboard like she was coding her way out of a time bomb. I didn't waste time. "What do we have?" I asked. Naomi looked up, eyes sharp as lasers. "I found the fatal flaw," she said, voice low but charged. Erin stood beside her, arms crossed, her gaze locked in anticipation. Naomi continued, scrolling quickly through several files. "Brandon and Celeste submitted documents showing that you allegedly transferred funds to 2 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands last March. Each document lists specific account numbers, dates, and amounts." I nodded, jaw tight. "And the problem?" Naomi turned the monitor toward me and pointed at a highlighted line of text. "Those accounts didn't exist on the dates listed. The bank confirmed they weren't even opened until 3 months after the supposed transactions." I squinted at the screen, heart thudding. "You're saying they just made it up?" "Not just made it up," Naomi said. "They were sloppy, desperate. They forged transaction history on accounts that hadn't even been created yet." Erin's voice cut in, cold and exact. "This isn't just unethical. This is a felony. Submitting false documentation to the court is a criminal offense." Naomi nodded. "I also checked metadata on the PDF files they submitted. All of them show signs of tampering. They were edited using third-party PDF software. The timestamps don't match, and the internal file history proves manipulation." A rush of air escaped my lungs, not relief, but release. Like someone had cut the wire on the ticking bomb that had been strapped to my chest. They didn't just try to ruin me. They criminally tried to frame me. "So what now?" I asked. Erin smirked the kind of smirk that means war. "Now? We go on the offensive." 3 days later, we were back in court, this time in courtroom 4C at the Harbor County Courthouse. Erin and I walked in side by side. I wore a tailored black suit, my hair pulled into a tight bun. No makeup, no softness, just steel. Brandon was already there, seated with Celeste and a new attorney, an older man with silver hair and expensive shoes. A fixer, no doubt. Someone brought in to contain the mess. But there would be no containment today. As the judge entered and called us to begin, Brandon's lawyer opened his mouth to speak, but Erin beat him to it. "Your Honor," she said, rising to her feet and placing a thick folder on the judge's bench, "we submit into record a full analysis of fraudulent documentation submitted by the plaintiff in this case." Stamped across the file in bold red, "Evidence fabricated, financial records." Naomi stepped forward next. She walked the court through every forgery with surgical precision. The non-existent bank accounts, the transfer dates that didn't align with reality, the digital timestamps altered through editing software, the metadata discrepancies proving the files were falsified. Each point hit the room like a strike of thunder. You could feel the air thickening with every word she spoke. When Naomi finished, silence fell like snow. The judge turned slowly to Brandon. His voice was low, firm. "The court will review the accusation of submitted forgeries. If verified, the plaintiff could face serious legal consequences, including referral to the district attorney's office for prosecution." Brandon's attorney jumped to his feet, whispering rapidly into his ear. Brandon's face, so smug just a week ago, was now pale and rigid. His lips pressed into a tight line, so hard they looked like they might split. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see me, to feel every inch of the ground falling out from under him. That afternoon, I sat alone on my balcony, wrapped in a heavy coat as the wind howled over Portwell. The lights of the city flickered on one by one below me. Naomi's words still echoed in my ears. They forged everything so poorly, we can file a countersuit. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was time to end his game, to turn every lie into a charge, every betrayal into a debt owed. I took a long sip of wine, my hand steady as I signed the paperwork Aaron had prepared. Counterclaim fraud, defamation, and submission of falsified evidence. Each letter was a blade. Brandon Hayes and Celeste Vero wouldn't just lose in court. They would be exposed, publicly and legally, for what they truly were. I want everything, I told Aaron. Damages, legal fees, reputation loss, every penny, every hour. Aaron didn't flinch. You'll get it, she said. The hearing is scheduled for next week. We're not playing defense anymore, I said. No, she replied, fire in her eyes. It's time to strike back. Brandon sat at the plaintiff's table with Celeste Vero beside him, her face painted in calm defiance, though her fingers twitched around her phone. Next to them, a silver-haired attorney adjusted his cufflinks, clearly brought in at the 11th hour in a desperate attempt to salvage what remained of their case. But hope, it learned, is a luxury for the unprepared. And Brandon Hayes had run out of time. When the judge asked for opening statements, Erin Wallace rose to her feet with the quiet command of a seasoned warrior. Your Honor, my client, Maya Ellison, files a counterclaim against Mr. Brandon Hayes and Ms. Celeste Vero on 3 grounds. 1, defamation via intentional dissemination of false information. 2, submission of falsified evidence in legal proceedings. 3, willful legal fraud aimed at manipulating divorce settlements. The judge arched an eyebrow, then gave a curt nod. Proceed. Erin moved forward, laying down a series of crystal-clear, high-resolution exhibits on the bench, each one a dagger. The forged bank transfers. The metadata analysis. The Cayman Island account numbers that never existed on the claimed dates. Then Naomi Reed stepped up, her tone clinical and unforgiving, as she detailed the breakdown how every digital document submitted by Brandon's team showed signs of PDF manipulation, false timestamps, and unauthorized account creation. The judge watched in silence. Brandon didn't smirk, didn't blink, just stared, pale and rigid. Erin wasn't finished. She placed a new folder on the bench. This, she said, tapping the cover, is evidence of a coordinated smear campaign targeting my client. Inside were leaked messages, anonymous emails, dozens of screenshots all traced back to an IP address registered under Celeste Vero's apartment lease. Ms. Vero not only conspired to forge financial documents, Erin continued, she was also the origin of harmful, false rumors that directly impacted Ms. Ellison's professional standing. Brandon's attorney tried to rise, voice trembling through a weak objection, something about speculative motive. Erin didn't even blink. She tapped the courtroom screen, and a recovered message appeared, retrieved from Brandon's phone under subpoena. If she gets hit with money laundering, we can push for a better settlement. Celeste. The room froze. No one spoke. Even the judge leaned back, visibly taking in the weight of the betrayal and deception laid out before him. As the court recessed to deliberate, I turned to Erin. You think he'll withdraw? She smirked faintly. Did you see his face? Brandon never thought he'd lose, let alone be exposed. And she was right. When the judge reconvened the session, Brandon's attorney stood this time visibly shaken, voice catching as he addressed the court. Your Honor, my client wishes to withdraw all original claims. He will no longer pursue action against the defendant. I didn't react. No smile. No sigh. But inside, it felt like thunder rolling across dry earth. Not joy, something quieter. Relief. Victory. Justice. The judge cleared his throat, voice steady and final. The court acknowledges the plaintiff's withdrawal. Due to the severity of submitted evidence, Mr. Brandon Hayes is ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by the defendant, including those related to the counterclaim. He glanced down at the folder one last time before continuing. Furthermore, this case will be referred to the Civil Legal Fraud Review Board for investigation. The gavel came down like the final nail in a long, bitter war. Brandon bowed his head. Celeste didn't even look up. I rose to my feet. My shadow followed me out of that courtroom, but I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. The ride home was quiet. The city of Portwell blurred outside the car window, a rush of lights and movement, like distant memories being wiped clean. Erin finally turned to me, her first smile in weeks blooming across her face. "You did it, Maya." I leaned back into my seat, the tension in my spine finally beginning to ease. "I survived," I whispered. "Now I start over." 2 weeks passed. And then, on a crisp morning at 9 a.m., my phone rang as I watered my lavender plants on the balcony. Aaron's voice came through clear, no small talk. He signed. I froze. The watering can tilted slightly in my hand, water spilling over the ceramic rim as my heart paused. The divorce settlement is now officially in effect. I didn't speak, just stood there, the soft scent of lavender filling the air around me. "Brandon gets nothing," she added. "No assets, no alimony, not a single cent. The court denied all his financial claims, and the fraud report's already been forwarded to the district attorney's office." I closed my eyes, tilted my head toward the sun, took the first breath that felt entirely mine in years. Freedom. I used to think it was something distant, something reserved for people who had already healed. But I was wrong. Freedom comes the moment you stop living for someone else's approval, the moment you stop apologizing for being strong. I hadn't lost anything I needed. I had only lost the weight I was never meant to carry. In the end, what I kept wasn't money or property. It was the most valuable thing of all, myself. That afternoon, I met Erin Wallace in her office one last time, not for war, but for peace. The scent of freshly polished oak still lingered in the room, but the atmosphere had changed. No tension, no looming battles, just quiet closure. Erin placed a sleek folder on the table in front of me. "This is the court-approved copy of the settlement," she said. "You just need to sign here." I picked up the pen. There was no hesitation. Every stroke of ink felt like sealing off a wound and opening a blank, beautiful page. When I was done, Erin looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen in months. "You did what most wouldn't dare. You didn't just win, Maya. You stood tall, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. A real smile. One that didn't hide behind grief or grit. Because I had no other choice anymore, I wasn't going to live halfway again." That evening, I invited a few of the people who had walked through the fire with me, Margot, my foster mom from college, and Naomi, whose precision saved my future. Erin came too, carrying a bottle of red from a quiet vineyard in the valley north of Portwell. "No talk of Brandon tonight," I said, lifting my glass. "Tonight is about us, about freedom, about living true." We toasted. The wine shimmered in the light, catching golden hues as it danced in our glasses. I looked around the kitchen, a room that had once been a battlefield, the backdrop of lies and manipulation. Now it was filled with laughter, the clinking of glass, the low hum of shared joy. No one had to tell me I'd made the right choice. I felt it. In every breath. In every beat of silence that wasn't holding a secret. The next week, I drove north, just me, the open road, and no destination but peace. I rented a small lakeside cabin in Coastal Ridge, Washington, far from the buzz of Portwell. No phone, no emails. Just books, a worn sketch pad, and 3 oversized sweaters that smelled like cedar. Most days, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the stillness of the lake. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about remembering who I was before all this and asking, maybe for the first time, what do I want? I wanted mornings without tension. I wanted to drink coffee without glancing at a screen face down on the table. I wanted to love again one day, but not out of emptiness, out of wholeness. So I wrote those truths down in a plain leather journal, no glitter, no decoration, just my voice. When I returned to Portwell, I didn't walk back into my old law firm. I had no need to stay in a place where whispers once sliced through my name. I typed out my resignation in 2 lines. No explanations, no apologies. Instead, I opened my own firm, a boutique legal practice built for women clawing their way out of toxic marriages. Aaron helped me file the business paperwork. Naomi joined as our financial advisor. I named it Phoenix Legal Group because ashes aren't the end. They're the start of something fierce. On an October evening, the wind picked up as I sat on the balcony of my new apartment. The city lights below began to glow like little lanterns against the dusk. A warm mug of ginger tea sat between my palms, a soft blanket draped over my shoulders. Jazz played low from a speaker near the window. My phone vibrated once. No caller ID, no message. Just a silent, nameless attempt to reach me. I stared at it for a second, then hit block. No hesitation, no regret. I stood, walked inside, and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop not for a deposition, not for a defense, but to begin something new. A story that belonged to me. A story no one could twist or take away. Maya Ellison's story is a reminder of something we all need to hear. Sometimes, the people closest to us do the deepest damage. But survival doesn't mean staying quiet. It means rising. Betrayal may try to define you, but it also reveals who deserves a seat at your table and who never should have been there to begin with. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise when you're shattered. So if you're reading this, wondering whether you have the right to protect yourself, let me be clear. You do. You deserve a life free from manipulation. You deserve peace that doesn't feel borrowed. What do you think of Maya's journey? If this were your story, what would you have done differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. And follow the channel for more powerful, true stories about healing, hope, and becoming the strongest version of yourself.